Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel today. I'm Kevin, and today we're back to our biopsychological topics. So in the last topic, we completely finished the, let's say, information about the myth, about the power of critical thinking, and I gave you some examples, especially about the lobotomy examples, for you to find out about how scientists work in the past and eventually try to avoid the mistake they've made. And today we will talk about something a little bit more formal. Today we will talk about a whole topic of evolution, genetics, and experience. Of course, saying this is the main topic, but yeah, we will going to, let's say, spread it into a lot of videos. So it's just a small fraction of the core topics we're having that I've just said. So our topics today, to be true, is about thinking of the biology and behavior, from dichotomies to the interaction. Well, you see, we all tend to think about the things in way that have been ingrained, which means, let's say, they have been injected, have been blended into our brain, our mind, by the era, by the society around us, or you could use the word zeitgeist. This is the general intellectual climate of our culture. That is why this is a particularly important thing for you to understand. That you see, you are an intellectual product of the society and of the zeitgeist around you. So you see, the zeitgeist is the society around you, and they provide you with information so often, so frequently, that you start to believe that they are right. For example, in the last topic, we've already took a small, well, let's say, moment to think about the myth that does human really need 8 hours to sleep so that they could become healthy? And the answer, of course, is not always, because Japanese only need 4 of that to stay smarter than most of the human on the world. So you see, even when 4 hours is somehow enough for a small fraction of the population to stay clear, to stay smart, but well, you still believe that 8 hours of sleep will help you to stay concentrated instead of 4. And of course, this topic will talk about mainly, the things that we know about our belief, our behavior, and the core of thinking. It is not a skill like critical thinking, but we are talking about the mind and the mental, how our bodies and our brain interact with each other, and how the societies make a belief of it, make, let's say, a way to determine what is soul, what is mental, and why that human have this thing but not that thing. So today mainly we will talk about how that people use their mind, use their mental, and we will dig into the core of the biology of behavior, from dichotomies to decision to interaction. So, well, as I just said, we tend to ignore the subtitles, the subtleties, the inconsistencies, and the complexities of our existence, and to think in terms of simple decision. For example, well, right, wrong, good, bad. But well, none of us really take a big amount of time to look back of our belief. What is wrong? What is right? And why we believe they are wrong or right? Well, let's take an example. The monkey will, let's say, be ready to kill each other if they are in short of food. And of course, human also does so. But well, the economic crisis is not so, let's say, they're not so critical that cause human to do the same. But well, many documentary and of course scientific film, imaginary film, they show a future where human got into a food shortage and they decide to eat each other. So you see, well, there are some things that we never see with our eyes, and scientists believe they happen. But sometimes we see the society around us, our zeitgeist, will give our information and belief that we see that is inconsistent with what we usually believe or what has been proved in science. So let's say you think of something like it's good or like it's right, but in some other country, it's become the wrong thing. For example, in Vietnamese, many people believe that eating dog meat is a normal thing, but for the others, include me. I think that is something a little bit disgusting because according to my vision, dog is friends, not food. Of course, yeah, that is just well, they can share emotion, right? They can be friends. They can do anything with us. I mean, they are like a partner that we must respect. And I don't like to eat dog meat. And of course, I think about eating dog meat as a disgusting action, but the others don't think so. And I have to respect that. And I do respect their decision. Why is that? Because, well, there are no real rules that force people to eat or not eating dog meat. Like some people think about it as culture, some people think about it as memory of a food shortage, and some think about it as misbehave. But well, whether what is the truth between, I mean, inside or under the culture of eating dog meat of Vietnamese, we see that, well, even in the same countries, with some people, this thing is right, and with some, this thing is wrong. So, well, the Zeitgeist gave us a belief that, well, eating this thing is not good or good, and that will depend on who is around us. If you were surrounded by people, for example, your parents, and they don't like to eat dog meat, so you will don't like to eat dog meat. And if your parents want to eat dog meat every day, so you will get acquainted to that, and eventually you will get used to eating dog meat, while the others may don't have the same circumstance, and eventually they think in a different way. So you see, our let's say our mind are really complex. They force us to think a lot of different perspective, a lot of different view to eventually make a decision. But human, our mankind usually get over. I mean, they just let's say erase the existence of the complexity and the consistencies between emotion and thought so that they could get things into simple terms like good thing, bad thing, wrong thing, or right thing. And you see, the allure or what make this type of making decision attractive is that they're just simple. You don't have to struggle to really understand why did you make the decision. For example, you ask me, do you like a man or you like a girl? I will absolutely say I like a girl. And then you ask why. Then some people say, well, I'm a man. It's right for me to love or to like a girl, right? And of course, some people will turn into something different that I don't understand. But well, let's just not talk about it right here. So you see, that is how people tend to explain or tend to think. Well, nature said so. So that's what we are. Why are we going into a different way? But well, the real thing is that, for example, you see in this society, some people tend to be, let's say, man love man, right? And of course, not always anybody will support that opinion. But well, a part of the population still support that opinion of man love a man. So you see, well, if you ask that man, do you love a man or girl? They will say, well, I love a man. And of course, when you ask why, you will hear them say, well, that is just my emotion. I don't know. So you see, we never try to look so deep into our emotion and how they affect the way we think. Some people think that men should love women, but some people think, well, it's normal for men to love men. And as there are so many different opinions exist in this world that was affected by emotion, circumstance, and the belief of the one that is making the choice. So you see, our brain are more complex and hard to understand than what we usually show out with our voice, our word, and our face. So the tendency to think about behavior in terms of dichotomies is illustrated by two kinds of questions. So, well, these two questions is commonly asked before a person make a behavior. It is physiological or it is psychological. It is inherited or it is learned. This is two types of question. The first one is physiological or psychological, and the second is this is from your parent. Is it inherited or is it learned from the other in the world outside? So both questions have been proved to be misguided. They lost the main topic. But still, many people ask this question in their mind before they make a decision, of course, passively or actively. But, well, in the end, they are the most commonly used question in scientists and also daily life, so there are place for them in this topic. And now we will also talk about the, well, first question and the second question. That was the plan. But I think that we would just focus on the first question. Is this physiological or psychological instead of the is this inherited or learned? We will leave that for the next topic because it's a little bit complex for that, right? So you see, the opinion that human process fall into one of two categories or two groups of decision. The first one is the decisions that was affected by the physiological well factors, and the second one is the choice that was in fact or affected by the psychological element. So, well, you see, this type of belief has a long history in many cultures, and well, to be true, the moment it was popularized or was started to be noticed that there is a trend that people tend to think like this, they tend to group their decision into physiological or psychological into two groups, is when the scientists have conflict with the person comes from the Roman Church. So, well, in Western culture, it rose to prominence, which means popularity, following the Dark Ages, in response to a 17th century conflict between science and Roman Church. So at this time, scientists start to grow and they start to wonder about the things that the church and the people in that inside the church told that God said so and you have to believe. So, well, there is a fun fact about the let's say 16th century to the 17th century, or just simply before the 17th century. So before this time, people usually believe a lot in God, and every time a person that represents their God says something, they will always believe that it was true, even when somehow it goes against science. And of course, the church also have, I mean, the government also have the way to take control with the, yeah, the regions and the religion of the people or the citizens in their country. So they decide to take the church as a tool as well sometimes. And sometimes the church, those who stand in place or they stand in charge of controlling the church will eventually take the government role as well. So you see, in about the years of 1400, things start to change. The famines, plagues, and marauding armies that had repeatedly swept Europe during the Dark Age subside, and the interest start to turn into art, commerce, and scholarship. This was the period of the Renaissance, or in the other word, the Rebirth. So you see, this area, some Renaissance scholars were not content to follow the command of the church, or you could say the dictates of the church. Instead, they start to find the knowledge themselves to, well, by observing the things around them in their real life and try to figure out the pattern, figure out the rules, instead of just listening to what the truth had been popularized to the citizen. And at this moment, the modern science was born. Much of the scientific knowledge that accumulates or was has been collected by the scientists during the Renaissance was at odds, or which means they make conflict with the, well, the media and the information that the church had been given. However, the conflict was resolved by a prominent French philosopher named Descartes. Descartes advocated a philosophy that, in a sense, gave one part of the universe to science, to physics, to chemistry, and the other part to the church. He argued that the universe is composed of two elements, the soul and the body, physical matters which behave according to the laws of nature and thus is suitable for object of scientific research and investigation. And the second thing is the human mind. Well, the soul, the self, or the spirit, these things lack physical substance and they don't follow any rules in the real world chemistry or physical rules, you see. And of course, this include the mental, or let's say a way to talk about the brain, you see. And of course, because at that time scientists don't really got so smart that they could figure out something is good or bad or qualify something as far as artificial intelligence or expert can do for us today. And of course, many experts nowadays still believe that souls exist and God exists, something like that. Of course, it's not wrong. But you see, this thing is not focused on the rule of physics. It's not focusing on the rule of chemistry. They focus on how to give the power to both the scientists and the church. So from my point of view, I think that the Descartes tried to make a solution that scientists could grow and could develop, let's say, peacefully without the attack and the interference from the church by giving the church 50% of the power of the citizen so that the church will lower the guard and let science going to be developed beautifully. All right. So you see, the Cartesian dualism, as the Descartes philosophy became known, was sanctioned and started to be popularized around the Roman Church area. And so the idea that the human brain and the mind are separate entities become even more widely accepted, especially in the centuries where the religions and the God belief are still taking a vital role in the human belief and society. And of course, it has survived to this day, the belief that the mind and the body are two different entities. But of course, our topics that we are talking about today, the biopsychology, are trying to prove that the mind and the bodies are just exactly the same. They connect with each other and they affect each other. So, despite the intervening centuries of scientific progress, most people understand that human behavior has a physiological basis. They also based on biology, which means they based on our body. They based on how our brain and our body works, based on how chemistry works. But of course, a large proportion of people still believe that, well, human mind are something that transcends or surpass the, well, physical structure of our brain. Well, so that is for the first question that people usually make when they try to make a decision and try to group a decision into two parts, or you could say the dichotomies about, is this the physiological or is it psychological? And of course, for the, well, is it inherit or learned from the outside? We will talk about that thing and we'll pay some attention to that in the next video. And I think it's time for us to say goodbye then. So see you in my next video. Bye bye. See ya.